Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we're super happy to have you here. And if you've been listening and enjoying for a while, I would be super grateful if you would please take a moment to give us a review on Apple Podcasts. It's one of the best and simplest ways to pay it forward and help others find the show so that they too can tap into the powerful perspectives and positive vibrations we are collectively emanating. The other unique and magical way to share this show is by sending any friends you think would benefit from listening to this podcast our Game with the Universe link at positivehead.com/game. Also listed in the show notes, which will serve them up a quote unquote random episode when they click it. Just instruct them before clicking the link to close their eyes for a moment and sincerely ask the universe to cue up the episode that contains the insight and perspectives that they most need to hear at this point in their life journey, and then click to listen to whatever episode is synchronistically served up to them. I have heard time and time again from people about the incredible results they received playing the game. So just tell your friends magical results are guaranteed or their karma back. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have Peter Panagore back here with me on the show. Peter was originally on the show a few weeks back on episode 1821, where he shared the miraculous details of his near-death experience. And I wanted to bring him back on the show to discuss all the wisdom he has unlocked and brought back from the other side in the decades since that experience, because most of that episode, it was a detailed account of what he experienced there. So, excited to have you back, Peter. Welcome, my friend.
I am super psyched to be back, Brandon, and apparently I just missed you in Venice.
Yeah, we just figured that out, and hopefully next time you come through, we can get together, and perhaps you can even experience one of the Mystic Manor gatherings that we organize. Myself and my partner, really, it's the main person, but yeah, it's such an incredible amount of transformational community here in LA, and it'd be great to connect in 3D next time.
Cool.
So let's for those of you who haven't checked out episode 1821, I definitely recommend going back and listening. Peter, maybe you can give like a real high level, 60-second description of what happened to you and what you go into, pretty much a full hour or so account of that experience in that episode. But maybe you can give, high level there, and then we'll just kind of jump into some of the other topics that we didn't have a chance to get to last time.
So in 1981, I was ice climbing in Alberta, Canada, and I died of hypothermia. I crossed over into a state of union, and I came back an entirely different person.
Yeah, and you were what, 20 years old or something?
20 years old. Yep, just had my birthday just the month before.
Wow, what a trip to face death when you're really just kind of coming online as a young man, right? That had to be so intense.
Yeah, it not only did the near-death experience set me apart from everybody else I knew, just having faced my mortality set me apart from my entire peer group. Nobody in my peer group that had any idea. Yeah,
right. Wow. And how would you say that it changed you when you came back? What?
Wow, where to even? That's so. I came back.
It's a big question.
It's a huge question, because it didn't just change my personality and my character. It changed my entire relationship to my human body and my relationship to the world. I never fully came back. Most of me, I still live in this continual state of being in this. I talk in metaphor in the story when I tell how I died, but I also have to talk in metaphor when I talk about this, because there's a relationship between the two. I'm outside of myself. I live above myself. I see myself and my life as a witness to myself. I witness my own living. I live inside
Mm.
my body as like when I first came back into it, when I was first brought back into it, I was contained inside of it like a prison. And but I
Mm.
knew that I was that I could see the prison because I was seeing it from a higher place. I could see
Yeah.
myself in it. So it's kind of like that the 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 Heisenberg principle, when the
Mm-hmm.
experimenter has an impact on the experiment, their participation in it changes the
Mm-hmm.
experiment. Well, previous to this,
Right.
I didn't know that I was in an experiment, and now I know,
Right.
and so I'm inside of myself. This is the fundamental difference for me before and after, is that I know now that I am not a human being. I know that I am
Mm.
a consciousness inhabiting a human body with all of the necessities, frailties, and advantages of being a human being, but I know that none of them are me. And my first experience in the world was of its thinness, of its black and whiteness, of its flicker, of its crudity, of its less thanness, of its limited form, of its impurity, and through all of the cracks between all of these things that I just described, light is still pouring through, but I can see the light pouring through, but I also can see that I can't see the light I saw before, in
Mm.
quality, and its in intensity, and its quantity, and
Mm.
so I came back pretty pissed off. I was upset that I
Mm.
made this choice, and
I hear that a lot. Like people coming back and they're very depressed, to be back in their human form.
yeah, because it's I wish I could get this quote down, but once you see Paris, you never go back to the farm. It's kind of,
Yeah, right, 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 right.
once you see the big city, I live in the country,
Right.
just saying, I live in the country because of the
Yeah.
intensity of the spirituality present in nature itself. Okay, so I've seen the big
Yeah.
city and I've gone back to the big city, but for me, it's the divine presence inside all that exists, especially living
Mm.
creatures. But I was depressed for 20 years. That was another big part of it. I lived in this
Wow.
constant state. So I kept a secret. I kept a secret of this for 20 years, and I um, prayed every day. I dove into my interior self, knowing that the only way out of here was back in again. The only way I was ever going to gain any more amount of light here was to empty myself of myself, to create a space within this body to embody this. But in the midst of this deep practice, I also prayed every single day to die. I prayed every day, take
Wow.
me today. Today is a good day to die. Take me home today. I don't want to be here. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have agreed to this. I'm not your guy. And
Wow.
so on the one hand, I have this desperation to go home, which turns out to have been the very thing I needed to drive the other part of me, which was this desire to create space inside myself for the divine. The two went together. So the darker my depression was, the more I dove inside, and the more I dove inside, the more light there became inside of me, until finally, in 2015, I died again. And then
Wow.
and then that and I chose to come back again, this time from my
Wow.
I know.
Okay, this time you got no excuse,
No, I
man.
had no excuse. Well, that's the
Yeah.
thing. So, and I came back for my granddaughter this time, and my kids, but mostly my granddaughter, and there are reasons for that. But after that, in 2015, I stopped. I woke up in the hospital having get a stent, and I died of a heart attack, 100% blockage in my
Wow.
widowmaker. I live an hour and a half away from the catheterization lab. I was almost an hour before I left our local emergency center to leave.
Wow.
So I was well outside the golden hour of survivability long before I got to the cath lab, and I died on the way. And they shot
Wow.
me up. But my experience of it was that I I was meditating because I can't take like opioids because they make me sick. and I was already going to be
Mm-hmm.
in the back of an ambulance. And I'd spent a lot of time in the back of an ambulance. I had been an ambulance attendant. I knew that I didn't like it back there with the diesel smell, and
Yeah.
so I was meditating to hold my pain away, which is a powerful meditation. Can, as long as you're in the meditative state where you are staring at that pain with all of the breath and focus that you can muster, you rise above the pain. I rise above the pain, and I can look at the pain. I can witness the pain. So it's actually very similar to what we were talking about a minute ago. So this being above myself, I witness my life. I witnessed my own
Mm.
suffering. It still hurts in this world, but I'm a witness to it. But in the meditative state, the pain stops. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're riding in the ambulance, and I'm meditating to hold my pain off. And I hear her say, "We're losing him," on the radio. And I open my eyes to look at her. And as soon as I opened my eyes, she had fear on her face. But she went back to her professional face, as she should. And she did. And she was a paramedic. And as soon as I came out, my pain, like an elephant standing on my chest, I'm crushing my heart. I went back inside myself to meditate, but when I went back inside myself to meditate, I wasn't in me anymore. I was outside
Mm.
of me in the tunnel, in the dark void, above my body. But it wasn't like I was looking at my body inside, floating at the top of the ambulance. It was more like I was um in the tunnel. I was in the tunnel, and I could see inside my human self. And this angelic being who had come to collect me before came and rushed toward me and, "Welcome home, welcome, welcome, welcome. Come home to us. Come home to us. We've been waiting for you." This singular being speaking in the plurality. And as it
Wow.
rushes toward me and it's speaking to me telepathically, no language, I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's my day. I am out of here." So
Wow.
even as I was having this heart attack, I was at a yoga class, and I slipped out of the yoga class because I
Oh,
had this
you were in yoga class when you had the heart attack.
yeah, I had a congenital thing going on that, it turns out, it killed my grandfather, it killed my sister, would have killed my dad, almost killed me. It did kill me, but I came back. So yeah, I was in a yoga class and have this 100% blockage in my widowmaker, and I'm lying on the grass outside the studio, and I'm like, "God, I didn't know today's my day." And I'm like,
Wow.
I've been waiting for 20 years to die, because I had this prohibition on taking my own life. I was part of my NDE. You can't take what you didn't create. And it wasn't just talking about
Yeah.
my physical self. It was talking about my consciousness, the totality of my actual beingness, my soul, as it were, this eons old uh me that's always constantly
Mm.
being created, but is also in timelessness always wicked old. So, but I had this prohibition from killing myself. I thought a lot about it. I mean, like I had a whole lot of plans. I developed a bunch of plans over my lifetime, but all the time I would come up against this wall. You can't take your life. So
Yeah.
I woke up that morning and I was like, "Hey, it's my day to go." And no, I didn't know that when I woke up in the morning. But as soon as it happened, I was smiling to myself. I didn't know today was my day to go home. I'm sorry.
So there wasn't fear for you because of your
Zero,
former.
zero fear.
Wow.
All my life. I told my wife about my NDE, of course, and one of the things that I would talk to her privately about is my I have a no fear of death at all.
Yeah.
Zero. Like, dying can suck. Okay, dying can be really hard and painful, but
Sure.
even that is alleviated to a degree by the divine presence that's cultivated inside me. So as I'm dying, I'm waiting to go home, and as I'm dead, I welcome the angel toward me, and the angel rushes toward me, and I go. I'm like, "I'm out of here," and I start to go. But now I know what's going on this time. I'm not befuddled like I was last time and confused. And I'm like, "Well, hold on a second. This is kind of sudden. Let me check out everybody in my life and see if they're okay." So I kind of turn around and I duck back inside I wasn't in my body per se, like I was feeling my physical self. I was inside my brain. I
Hmm.
was looking at the people. I don't know how to describe this. I could see my son and my daughter and my granddaughter and my wife, and my son had coming at the urgent care center. He had grabbed my hand and leaned in. He's 26 or 27, and leaned in. He's, "I love you, Dad. I love you." And I could see all of this,
Mm,
like not prepared for this to happen. And
yeah,
I
sure.
could see my daughter, who's just left her abusive ex with a brand new baby, and who's going to protect the baby, and who's going to help my daughter. And I'm like, these
Mm,
people, they're not ready for me to go. And I turn around and I go back. I go back and I to the angel, and I say to the angel who had receded, I say to the angel who's now rushing toward me with the same welcome, "Come home, come home." I'm like, if it's all the same to you, I'm going to stay here for a while longer to help them. And I didn't,
wow.
I just turned around and went back in. And
Did you think about all the time you had
not,
wished
not,
to
not
go?
a second did I think of that.
Wow.
Not a second.
Wow.
Um, and I,
That's a parents or grandparents love right there.
it's like, I didn't even think about it. And ever since that day, I woke up the next morning, having had surgery and all that stuff, and it was gone. I wasn't. I had become yet again another person. And so one of the things that happens in near death experience is the my identity is reformed, and this is true for all of the mystical experiences I've ever had, where and sort of the higher level ones, where my self is shattered and I return to my body, I become a new person. It's Jesus talks about
Right.
being born again. Well, it's again and again and again and again and again. And so
Right.
the depression was finally gone from me. And I I'm okay with being here now. I'm finally pretty well integrated. Here's the weird thing about this whole reintegration here is that my integration didn't happen because I tried to invest myself in the world. My reintegration happened, and I did this by myself because there was no help in the world at the time. It was by going inward. So this depression, this mistake that I felt that I made, coming back to this world of suffering and darkness, was the very thing that drove me inward, because I didn't want
Mm,
to be here so badly. So I learned, I went to divinity school and I studied mysticism, and I learned the techniques of the contemplatives. And my studies were primarily in graduate school in the West, but my studies have taken me far to the East and into non-canonical literature and all sorts of other mystical writings. And what I find in all of the higher level genius mystics, they all were in pursuit of the one thing. They were all in pursuit of the divine oneness, the state of union. Comes by lots of different names, but it's this, not a pursuit of the world. And so I chose that path almost immediately after, within months of my coming back. And I have found it to be true. And I kept I
mm,
not only kept my mouth shut about my NDE for 20 years, I kept my mouth shut about my interior practice for much longer, for
mm,
until maybe 3 years ago, when I started talking about um, what my interior practice has been like and the reasons why I've practiced that. So my reality when I came back was I lived in a different world than everybody else.
mm.
It's like everybody was everybody around me perceived me to be the same as I had been before,
Yeah.
and my my language was the same, my appearance was the same, my behavior was not the same anymore, but my own experience of the world was that I was living in this very dense place while not living in this very dense place. I live in this very ethereal place inside of the dense place, where the light is still shows me that it's all there is. So there's this word called panentheism, with an N-E-N in
Hmm.
the middle, and it's the divine presence inside of all things, everywhere, all the time. That's this heaven that I live inside of here. And that simple glimpse of that, when I came back with this extra dose of juice, um, was combined with this depression, was enough to propel me on my inward journey. So
Mm,
a lot of my living in the world shifted immediately. So when I came back to, I'm from the Boston area. When I came back to Boston to my family that summer, I behaved very differently, noticeably, to my entire family. They didn't know why. I didn't
Wow.
tell them why, but I asked my mom and dad about it some years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago. Uh, what'd you think about that time? Because I didn't tell them either what had happened to me, and for 20 years. And then when I finally came
Hmm.
out to them, they didn't believe me. So it's like, um,
Wow.
now, but looking at my life, they are like, oh yeah, yeah, something really did really change in you. And I said, what was it? They said,
Mm.
you behaved with kindness and compassion. You always, in my dad was like, you
Mm.
always had been kind and compassionate, but it was just so much more. Um,
Yeah.
so that's
Wow.
that's one of the biggest changes is the I see others as myself. And
Right.
even if they're very different from me, I see their brokenness is the same as mine. They're being human
Mm.
being. When I say brokenness, I mean being in this matrix of the universe where everything consumes something else. And there's all these
Mm.
things that we can't control about our emotions. And but also that's one level. And then the other level is I see this divine light that is inside of every human being. And
Mm.
initially, stop me, okay? If I'm rambling, Brandon, you just jump in, okay?
Oh, I will.
Okay,
I
okay.
will. You're good.
Okay, so
You're good.
so the the corollary to this frailty of this radical equality of the frailty of all humanity is this radical equality of the divine light itself inside of all humanity and everything else. And
Right.
it and when I focus on my inward journey and I seek the oneness of the light itself, the deeper I go inside myself, the more I see in the world, the more equality there is in the world. And
Mm.
so it doesn't make me into a milksop. Um, I was bullied as a kid, and I studied enough martial arts, 3 years of martial arts, so that I could, after my NDE. So I began that practice after my NDE,
Mm.
because I didn't want to hurt other people, but I wanted to defend myself. So
Yeah.
it's not like I let people run over me. I don't, because human
Yeah.
being got to live in the world. But I
Yep.
don't. If you ever saw Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, did you ever see that movie? It's great.
I never did see that actually.
It's a great film, and I won't spoil it for you. But the protagonist, of course, he's like Super Mister Martial Arts, and all of the great kung fu sort of walk through walls, fly through the air kind of stuff. But he's in this one scene while he's in this middle of this battle, he stands upon the leaf of a tall bamboo tree. This he stands on this leaf and he's perfectly still and he's perfectly calm and he has only centeredness to him. There's no anger, there's no fight in him, there's just this centeredness in him. And this centeredness is became my pursuit inside myself, so that whatever turmoil is focusing itself on me in my world, that I can remain inside of this place, way down deep inside of me, connected to my higher true consciousness self, which I am this
Mm-hmm.
other. It's not like I am, it's like it's the human person that's the problem here for me.
Right.
I'm in
Right.
my
Right.
own way. And so the more I get out of my own way, the more I can actually be who I actually am in the context of the suffering of the world. And that's the biggest difference for me in my living in the world is this conductivity in this flow of heaven inside me, from outside me, from inside me. And
Mm.
in this state, which I have practiced, okay, because these a lot of these mystics of yore, ancient around the world, some had near-death experiences, many didn't. Many had other kinds of mystical experiences which are similar to NDE. NDE is an outlier, but it's all in the same box as lots of mystical experiences. And
Right.
um, and you don't need one, okay? You don't need an NDE. Just saying that. And I wouldn't recommend it. It
Yeah.
totally messes with your everything, every relationship.
Yeah. It might be a little simpler to have an experience through plant medicine or meditation or something where when you come back, your body's not wrecked.
Yeah, and it's not such a shock to your psychology or your emotion.
Yeah.
So this interior state that I pursued was guided by these mystical teachers of the ancient world. And I chose them as my teachers because in 1980, there was very little information, almost no information that I could find anyway about near-death
Yeah.
experience. And I didn't even have a name for what happened to me until 86. So it was 5 years
Yeah.
later but I knew that there was mystical wisdom in the world, and these mystical ancient writers became my peer group. These are the ones I knew would understand me because I understood them. So all of this is to say that I'm not in, I don't try to manifest anything physical in the world because I know that I'm only temporarily here. The manifestation I'm in pursuit of is to transform, is to open enough space inside myself so that the divine presence can be in me. And I let that take care of whatever it wants to. I don't try to direct it or aim it. I aim only at my interior self, only at the higher self, only at the oneness of being. And so
Interesting.
now I live in a bubble of heaven. I am this, and it doesn't take away my suffering. It doesn't, it doesn't prevent me from making mistakes. I'm still a human
Yeah.
being.
Sure.
But it makes my life a lot easier because I know where I'm from and where I'm going, and I know that this is a temporary place, and I get to live in a portion of heaven here and now. And
Yeah.
I've had other after effects, they call them, after gifts. I've been starting to call them. Some of them are helpful, and some of them are just disruptive. It's disruptive to me to I'm sort of loose in time and space. So on my way back from my first death, I had to choose a life that I would live from among a million lives that were all probabilities to live inside my physical body. And there was this
Right.
a density of light that I could have chosen, but I didn't. I chose off to the side of this density of light, still in the light, but I wanted some humanity in me. And in that tunnel, I saw all the way back being carried by this angelic God back into my body. Um, I saw all of the probabilities of all of my choices as real
Yeah.
living experiences. And so now, as I
Wow.
live in my body, and I make certain choices, I have this continual sense of deja vu. Now it's to the point where it's constant, and then there are like peaks of it. And so when these
Wow.
peaks of it happen, it's like I'm being sifted through time and space. Because when I died, my timeline ended. My timeline ended as Peter was over. I was told it's time to come home, and I chose to come back. And so I live with this constant knowledge of nobody around me knows that they're in a different timeline in my family and personal life because I made this choice. But this is true
Yeah.
for everybody. Everybody's making
Yeah.
choices all the time, shifting the timeline. So there's this like these waves and currents moving through based on all of our individual choices that we make. But for me, I saw my future constantly. I mean, I saw my
Yeah.
future, all of the potential futures. And so as I make these choices, I see I see that I saw it before it happens, but only for moments. So when it's in its intensity, and for the longest time, it was dislocating for me, so from social context and from the world context. So I'd be talking to somebody and I'd have this experience, this deja vu of intensity, that where I would lose track of the conversation or where I
Wow.
was because I was too much in like having my timeline readjusted. I don't know how
Wow.
that's a
Wow. Before we continue on with today's episode, I'd like to take a quick moment to tell you about a podcast that is focused on answering the big questions in life called Stories of Impact. Did you know that there are researchers out there working daily to discover scientific evidence about how you can flourish? Join Tavia Gilbert as she shares and connects with compelling stories all about the ongoing scientific exploration of how to live better and shares key discoveries of research grantees from the Templeton World Charity Foundation. I listened to an episode with Deepak Chopra where he discusses how human flourishing is intimately tied into our ability to tap into the flow state, which really resonates with me. As you know, if you have read my book, I wholeheartedly believe in the importance of focusing our flow. So, to continue improving your physical and mental health, tune into new episodes the first and third Tuesday of the month by subscribing and listening wherever you get your podcast. And be sure to check out storiesofimpact.org. Do you have the experience of, so we sit now, do you have the experience of remembering this particular timeline that you're in now and kind of what the outcome,
the outcome's always the same.
Yeah.
The outcome is always the divine presence. So it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter.
It's different paths to the same destination, essentially.
Yes, exactly. But here's the difference. So I have made a conscious choice in my life to pursue the light itself. And so even in my poor choices or my good choices, I'm still in pursuit of the same light. So always in every choice I make, I'm also always leaning toward the center of the light that I did not choose to come back in. And so, and if I were to not do that, then my outcome would still be the same because of the divine love that is all there is. But somehow there's also an intensity of it, even on the other side. When I was dead that first time, despite even though I was in this state of union where love and peace and healing and wholeness and bliss and knowledge and truth and love and beauty and all these things were in adoration and awe, and the one light being was inside of me, expanding me in this state where even my individual consciousness was losing its identity, which was a different identity than my human identity. And so even my consciousness identity was nearly to the point of obliteration and annihilation, to be folded back into the divine self. There was still in this state of union, there was still this separation. Even though I was in union, this paradox of infinity and finitude. And so even though I was in this what human beings would consider an almost infinite state when I was dead, I was not in infinity. I was still somehow a more limited form of it. And so
it was like both simultaneously.
Yes. And so as I lean into this light, I know that over not only just my human life, but over my consciousness life, if I have an intent or a desire for my post-human life is not to come back here unless I have to come back here. I'm like, I'll come back here if I can be a bodhisattva, maybe I'll come back. Okay. Is that a deal? But really I know, I'm like, but I don't really want to come back at all. I want to continue on this advancement. This advancement doesn't end at the moment of my death. There's light and fullness and forgiveness and love beyond our human capacity of understanding, but it's also not in the center of infinity. So I want that thing. So my whole aim in life isn't just this life. It's this other thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you feel, I thought it was interesting. You said, look, I'm not trying to manifest anything. I'm trying to, do exactly what you just said, is, focus on expanding your potential to hold light in the divine presence. So I'm curious, that being your main focus is because the more of that you can do, the more it sort of benefits you in that, let's say that's the ultimate aim of our soul, right? I don't know if you'd agree with that statement, but if it is, and then you focus on that here as opposed to how do I get, the next new car or make $1 million or whatever, that is sort of on your highest, your greatest and grandest version of yourself as far as the trajectory of what your soul. Would you say that's
100%?
Safe? Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a really important thing for people to tap into and touch on, this idea that, okay, if you shift your aim from focusing on, you know, worldly success, if you will, um, uh, you know, not only will you sort of have your ultimate success, um, but it also, I think what's interesting about that, from what I've seen as well, when we stop chasing the dragon, so to speak, that's when you can kind of have those things you were seeking anyway, sort of as like I think of this meme I saw a long time ago. It's Bob Marley laughing,
Mm.
and he's like, when you realize you can have everything by not needing any of it, and I think there's some real truth there.
Yes, and 100% of what you said. I know that I had an advantage, and because I came back already knowing that I'm not a human being, and
Mm-hmm.
so I know that I have that advantage, and I know where I'm from, and I know where I'm going. So it wasn't so difficult for me to make that choice. Actually, it was hard for my family that I made that choice.
Yeah.
I gave up a career path that I'd been on toward the family business for decades,
Mm-hmm.
which had ramifications down the road for the viability of it and all those sorts of things. And so, but as for me, um, it's I've lived a charmed life. I've lived an extraordinary life full of drama and full of peace and full of success that is my success is not financial success. My success is going through the doors to which I was led. I
Mm-hmm.
ended up I ended up working television. I'm making a movie. It's just like never in my
Mm.
wildest dreams could ever have I manifested a single one of those things, because all I did
Sure.
was aim always in everything I do toward this one thing.
Mm.
And yes, okay, so not always 100%. Sometimes I'm out having fun with my friends. Sometimes I'm doing, cleaning the house, so,
Sure.
um, but in the orientation of my direction, it's always toward this one thing. And so it's not so much that I chose heaven over earth as it is I chose to the end of selfishness,
Mm.
self-orientedness.
Yeah. Or even bringing, it seems like the aim is to bring heaven to earth in a
Yes,
sense.
it is. And what I discovered on this path is that, so I kept my mouth shut about it for on that this is what I was doing. I When I came back, I was in Montana, and I ended up having to hitchhike back to Boston because for extenuating circumstances. So I hitchhiked back to Boston with this buddy of mine, and we get back to Boston and spend the summer there. And I work doing construction, and I go back to UMass Amherst, and I took a mime class, and the teacher of the
Hmm.
mime class was trained by a student of Marcel Marceau. And so I'm in this school of Marcel Marceau where Marceau taught hatha yoga, and I'd never even heard of it. And so part of our
Mm.
mime training was hatha yoga. And one day the teacher, who's still a buddy of mine, he's not a buddy of mine. We're still friends on Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
And so he said to us one day in class, you ever hear of chi? And like, no, I don't know what chi is. So he gets us in this
Mm-hmm.
posture, and he has us with our hands, and one hand in front of our belly and the other hand above it like a chi ball, and to raise this up in this yoga posture and to stretch this chi up past our third eye, and none of these terms I knew at the time, up over our heads. And afterwards he said, okay, so what'd you feel? And everybody's like, I didn't feel anything. And I raised my hand. I said, well, I feel this tingling energy of like a ball in my hands that then stretched like putty that between my hands that kind of made me feel a buzz. And he said, oh, where'd you learn how to do that? I said, no, I don't know. Because I wasn't going to tell anybody what had happened to me. So he had me come up to the front of the class and kneel in front of him and shut my eyes. And he knelt in front of me. He said, put up my palms. I put up my palms. And he said, now what do you feel? I say, I feel pinwheels going to the right. I feel pinwheels going to the left. I feel pinwheels opposite each other. I feel pinwheels opposite the opposite direction. And then he says, open your eyes. And he's kneeling in front of me with his palms an inch away from mine, waving his hands once and together to the left and together to the right, and then opposite. And he said, where did you learn how to do this? And I said, I don't know. And so from that
Hmm.
point on, I knew that chakras were real. I knew that the divine energy was real. I felt this thing inside of me. I came back knowing that I am not a human being. And what did I know of myself? I knew that I was energy. I knew that I was
Mm-hmm.
consciousness, but I didn't know that I could feel myself. And once I learned to feel myself, I dove into the Yoga Sutras with Pantajali and Yogananda with when you're right near Lake Shrine, um,
Mm-hmm.
the autobiography where he talks about Kriya Yoga, and I incorporated these Kriya practices into my Hatha Yoga, and I consciously tried to make myself into a channel of heaven for me. This was for me. This was so that I could bear being in the world. And layer by layer, as I found my subtle body, as I was, people say, unclogging my chakras, which is not exactly how it worked for me, but something like that. I, and with the centering prayer practice I had learned when I was at Catholic high school, Theravada Buddhism invaded Trappist monastic thinking, and they've created this prayer of silence based in a Zen form of Theravada Buddhism and Christian mysticism that I was initiated into when I was in high school. Long story. So I combined these things in order to increase my interior capacity so that I could function in the world. And so the
Mm-hmm.
more I emptied myself of my own egoic self or my attachment to my own identity by moving my mind into a place of thoughtlessness, using thinking in order to silence my thinking mind, and simultaneous with this Kriya yoga practice, the larger heaven became inside of me until I could turn on the tap and open myself to the inward flow, and I could fill like a reservoir, like a barrel, like a 50-gallon barrel. I would fill up during the day, and then I would empty out during the day, and I'd be left with nothing except for this constant connection. And then one day, and as a result of a mystical experience where I was taken out of myself, and given a gift of this tube that ran through my solar plexus and my sacral chakra together, this flow of peace that lasted 6 months inside of me, flowing through me, that once I learned to reopen that after it closed, once I learned to find it and reopen it, then this flow happens. And then this flow began. And so I kept my mouth shut about this. I didn't want, I realized that I learned that there was such a thing as Shaktipat, this transfer of the divine energy. But I decided that if Yogananda was right, if Pantajali was telling the truth, if all these mystical geniuses I later studied were actually saying what was true, I should be able to use these tools to hammer away at my own self to create a thinner and thinner layer between me and the divine. And that one day my mission, which was to communicate this, I wouldn't need any words for it, because
It's an energy transfer. Yeah.
it communicates itself. And so I waited until people started telling me that that was what was going on with me.
Cool. Would you? I'm curious with your, you know, either of your NDEs or any of your experiences. You know, I know your first one you shared some, seeing all the as you said, million timelines that you could jump back into for yourself. Were you shown? I also remember you saying you kind of saw the light in every person
Mm.
on the planet at that time, and all the things going on, the light and the dark and everything in between, and how it was so perfectly balanced from the grandest view. And I'm curious if any part of that entailed a vision of the future for humanity, or different timelines of the future, or it was just specific to your own journey.
It was specific to my own journey. I
Okay.
did see when I was dead that nothing is lost, that
Mm.
after human beings, leave their bodies, all are welcome home because of the immensity of divine love. But in the
Well,
meanwhile, so as because I have an analytical mind, and I take in information and I synthesize it and I simplify it and produce it. And so as I look at the world and the state of the world, and as I look at the history of spirituality, so I'm an expert in the history of mysticism, and I have a very strong Christian historical context because I studied Christian history because that was part of my training. So
mm-hmm.
for, ever since the Apostle Paul, Christians have been waiting for the end of the world, and that's been interpreted
Mm.
different ways. Well, first of all, the world's not going to end. Okay. Humanity might end, but the
Yeah.
earth, it's been around for a very long time, and it's going to continue
Yeah.
to be around. Even if it gets hit by an asteroid, it will end up with
Yep.
another moon, but it's still going to be here.
Yep.
So it's
Yep.
not the end of time, but what I see is that we're going into a cataclysm. We're going into a global cataclysm that we made in the Anthropocene, which is the first time in the history of of the world where a single species has changed the environment to such a degree that it has an impact on everything else. So, what this means is major dislocation in the coming future when certain areas of the world melt and others heat up, and there's no more water in places, and there's big disruption in nation states. So there's that thing going on. But also there's this other thing. And this other thing, so in the history of humanity, there have always been near-death experiences. That we've always, somebody in a battle, or somebody falls down a well, or they get bitten by a snake or something, forever there are stories throughout all the cultures of individuals, and they're so important to the culture that they get recorded. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but now medical technology has advanced to the degree where human understanding of life-saving techniques has advanced, that we've created a scientific driver, a medical driver for spirituality globally that's never existed before. So here all the way through history, there have been individuals who've been mystics. All the way through history, people have been having visitations from the dead while they're grieving for them, having been brokenhearted. And in that communication, there's this direct light of healing and wholeness and well-being, and that life ain't over, bub. That I still love you and you still love me. And so from that point on, the person who experiences this, the human being, they have a change in their grieving and their mourning, and they have a destination and goal now. They're not hopeless anymore. And so for the rest of their life, they live through this mystical experience. So there's always been mystical experiences in the history of the world, but now this is the first time ever there's been tens of millions in the United States alone, not to mention all of Europe and Africa and Asia, all these other places where medical technology, primarily paddles and drugs, are bringing back the dead, creating an army of mystical people who are like these individual nodes of diodes of light that are sourced and connected like through an optic cable back to the divine light itself. And everybody has their own experience. But 70% of us, 70% of NDEers, we use two words. We use light and love, and both of those are metaphors. It's human love is not the same thing as unconditional divine love. It's an approximation of it. And the divine light isn't the light coming out of my, the photons from the overhead lamp here. It's a metaphor of it, but we all use these words. We are legion. There are so many of us now affecting the presence of heaven on earth. So we are like, when I go to these International Association for Near-Death Studies meetings, and when I've been in the monastic setting with the monks chanting the Gregorian chant, where there's this unified field that's a magnification of all of the collective individual portions of light, there's this unified field that's a multiple of it. When I walk into the IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies conferences, there's like this huge bubble of the divine light. And this huge bubble of the divine light is like an optical web that spreads around the earth, like the World Wide Web. or like
Mm-hmm.
Indra's net. This is like the divine light that is connected to the source inside us, but also connects between us. And if you've ever had this experience of feeling that resonance of you know, oh, what you say resonates in me. It's not what's being said that resonates, it's the divine presence itself that's resonating in you. This is it sees itself, it resonates with itself, and now there's this global magnification. So I
Mm-hmm.
see these two things happening at the same time. I see the future of the world and culture and society and nation states being headed into a great upset. And and
Mm.
and the only way to change a corporate culture or a community culture or a church culture, you can work on it like through dialogue and decision, but what changes it mostly and more quickly is cataclysm. When a cataclysm
Mm-hmm.
occurs, that's when people change.
Mm-hmm.
And as individuals and as societies. And with this coming cataclysm, global cataclysm, we had our first global cataclysm where everybody had the same experience recently, that pandemic, right? So that's a global cataclysm that we all shared. So similar to that. Meanwhile, science is raising the dead and creating this army of near-death experiencers. And we're all, for the first time in the history of the world, we're talking to each other. And I'm encouraging, part of what I'm doing here today is I want all NDEers out there in the world to tell somebody, talk about it.
Yeah.
Because the
Yeah.
more we talk about this, the more normalized it becomes. And the more normalized it becomes, then all the other mystical experiences who are alive today, and it's like 50% of the population has had some kind of mystical experience, especially, most
Yeah.
especially the visitation of the dead. But that's not the only kind there is. Then everybody else will be free to talk about it. And then we have a collective opportunity on a society level and a cultural level to engage in the public square in a conversation about our equality as human beings, our
Mm-hmm.
radical brokenness and our radical light. And if we can, by focusing in this radical light, maybe we have an opportunity to change the course of all of humanity, nudge us. And on top of all of this is this intensity of the divine heaven that is larger than it's ever been on earth previously, because there's so many of us and so many NDEers. So,
What is your? Oh, sorry, I was
so it's
gonna
cool. It's
jump in
cool. It's
real
cool.
quick. What is your take on darkness? I mean, we talked a lot about light.
Yeah.
Obviously, what is your take on that?
There's a couple kinds of darkness that I've experienced. One is the darkness of the light, and this dark infinite void where I was when I was dead was also illuminated. So there's this
Mm.
darkness that is light. The universe is made of
Hmm.
darkness, but it's not this darkness that's bad. It's this darkness that's
Mm-hmm.
a reduction. And inside of this is the
Mm.
light itself. The light itself
Wow. Yeah.
creates the darkness in order for
Like
the,
the void from which everything is sort of.
yes.
I believe Osho, first time I read, where it kind of blew my mind years ago, talking about how everything comes from the void. God emerges from a void, and it's sort of this,
Yeah,
almost paradox to,
it is a
everything and
paradox.
nothing simultaneously.
Exactly that. And so but our experience of it here in the world is this veil upon, the Muslims talk about 30,000 veils, 70,000,
Mm.
70,000 veils, 40,000 of
Wow.
which are really thick and dense. But by the time you reach the last 30,000, the light begins to come through. So we're beneath these veils of this darkness because we're in the system. And the same thing in the Heisenberg principle. You're actually in the experiment. So we're actually
Yeah.
in the experiment. That means we are part of it. And so by it we live beneath the darkness. We are the darkness itself. In terms of evil darkness,
Mm-hmm.
humanity is like the worst offender of us all. And all of that arises out of the selfishness of the egoic attachment to desire of my own need, which is obliterated in the higher levels of mystical experience where compassion and kindness and humility become manifest in the daily lives of those who have that form of enlightenment. And so the love and the light that all the NDEers talk about, it's in the same realm as the compassion and the humility and the kindness. So the darkness of the world is mostly human created. We do this to ourselves. And so I have hope, even facing the the how do I say this and be polite about it? Um, Even in the age of the oligarch, the autocratic oligarch, and the desire which grows out of the same root of selfishness, even out in this age, I still have hope. I have great hope because of this counterweight of the divine light that is revealing itself. So medical science, human beings have developed the capacities and the techniques for resurrecting the dead. They call it resuscitation. But they're resurrecting the dead, and we're coming back with the divine light. So we did this for ourselves too. But there's this divine motivation in this. There's like a divine plan in this. We've built the Tower of Babel back to the edge of heaven, and we've accessed heaven through our technology. And so now as long as this continues, as long as people keep being raised from the dead and resuscitated and keep coming back with all of our stories of the divine light that awaits us, whatever that story is, and every single mystic in the history of the world is different than everyone else. So this whole idea that NDEers, why is this NDE is different than that NDE? Because that's been true about mystics forever, because it's never about the story. The story is a containment in the cultural context and the education and the religion or in the brain of the person who experiences it, expressing it, and the metaphors that they can. So meanwhile, science is raising the dead, and we're all vibing on this resonance that originates in the source itself, that connects to itself, by itself, in itself, inside others. So we have a chance. So you asked me if I saw the future of the world. Some, not in my death, but I see it now.
Yeah. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Well, wow. Peter, I can't believe it's already been almost an hour of us going down this rabbit hole of perception. And so, as we wind down here, I'm just kind of curious if there's anything that you would like to share. What is most alive for you to share with the audience?
Well, meditation, breath, and mental focus in combination can stop the story that you're telling yourself inside yourself about who you are. That includes anxieties and fears, and it leads to this place, this interior space of peace. And maybe that peace is only in the moment you have the breath, that you have this moment of peace, but it pervades the day afterwards. And then it helps to face all of the anxieties and sufferings that we face and indignities and the world on the external. But you don't need that in terms of your salvation. Speaking as and that I never had a pastor's voice. I just talk like this. All you need is love. There's a Muslim, Jew, atheist, agnostic, Sikh, shaman. It doesn't really matter. What really matters is love, being loved and loving. And if you're alone in the world and have no one to love your plants, love your dog, love the day. This is the treasure of life. And it's the lens through which I accessed myself in heaven. It's the treasure of heaven. And you don't need any religion or spirituality, or some of my most advanced spiritual people I know are atheists because they live in this place of love and kindness. So meditate if you want heaven here now, but if you want heaven then there, just love.
I saw a quote by Eckhart Tolle the other day. Excuse me. The only thing that is ultimately real about your journey is the step that you are taking at this moment. That's all there ever is. And it's such a powerful thing to drop into that, fully feel that, like this moment is all there ever is. The past does not exist like you remember it. You may have some ideas about it, but we've seen how unreliable memory it can be. The future certainly is not going to show up exactly like you'd imagine it. This truly, and of course, his book, The Power of Now, I think is such a phenomenal, bestseller for that. It's touching on this profound, truth that, this is it. And if you're wanting to clear, I've seen this myself in the, even weeks back, I was at an event where I did breath work for an hour straight for the first time. I've done it many times before, 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there, whatever, and an hour straight. And just like you stated, like the energy that just think of, I heard that same day, 70% of the toxins we release through our body comes through the breath. So imagine focusing and symbolically what that represents when you're, really going deep with your breathing instead of the short, shallow breathing that a lot of people are doing unconsciously, and what that is symbolically doing as far as releasing anxieties and fears and connecting you, this idea that the breath connects you, to the divine. With each in-breath, you're sort of born, and then, in between there's a death, and then, kind of this back and forth between, breath and death are sort of, you live, right?
Exactly.
It's this kind of idea, and it's just such a powerful thing that is overlooked. You can go weeks and weeks without food. You can go, days without hours. You can go minutes without breath, and yet in oxygen, and yet it's the only thing that's still free, on our planet. It's infinitely abundant around you, and yet we're not tapping into that resource. So that's kind of what comes to mind.
Well said.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Oh, I did say that wrong. I just remembered it was between birth and death as breath. It's like the combining, the link, the bridge between the two, right? So, yeah, this has been amazing, Peter. Thank you so much for taking the time to come back on and share more and expand more with us here on the show. And yeah, been a good one. And of course, all of you out there, I know some people have already reached out to you. What would it, for those, or just hearing you for the first time, like I said, if you want to go back to episode 1821 a few weeks ago and hear the full account of his first near-death experience, it's quite the journey he shares. And then for those who want to connect with you, Peter, what is the best way to do that?
PeterPanagore.love.
PeterPanagore.love. Makes a lot of sense, Peter. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you.
And all of you for tuning your beautiful brainwaves and incredible hearts into another episode. Until next time, journey well.